Lila Hart arrived in Chicago on a gray Friday afternoon in March, pulling a pale pink suitcase behind her as she stepped into the Halberd Hotel, a boutique property tucked between two larger, more modern towers. The doorman barely looked up. To him, she was just another young guest in designer sweats, but to over 1 million online followers, Lila was more than that. She was the rising face of beauty tutorials, sharp with her branding, consistent in her uploads, and known for turning even the most mundane hotel bathroom into a cinematic content studio. She didn't announce the trip publicly, not this time. Her fans were used to excited updates, packing halls, airport selfies, hotel room tours. But there was none of that. Not even a hint that she'd left Los Angeles. This trip was different. According to the hotel's records, she had booked 3 nights, requested a top-floor corner room, and paid in full up front. Room 609. She declined turn-down service and asked for a second key card, though no one would ever use it. One staff member, a bellhop named Andy, remembered her vividly, not because of her fame, but because of how quiet she seemed. She barely made eye contact. She carried 2 ring lights, a large checked bag, and a slim black envelope that she didn't let out of her sight. When he offered to carry it, she said no. Once inside the room, she placed the envelope gently on the nightstand. No one ever saw it opened. At first, there was nothing to suggest anything was wrong. Surveillance showed her entering alone, elevator to the 6th floor, then a straight walk down the hall. She didn't speak to anyone else that day. She didn't order food, didn't call the front desk. She kept to herself. That night, around 7 p.m., she went live on Instagram for 7 minutes. It wasn't the bubbly, polished Lila her followers were used to. She was subdued, slower with her words. She had her ring light on, but seemed distracted, glancing off screen more than once. At one point, she stopped mid-sentence and stared, silent, for almost 10 seconds. Then she smiled weakly and ended the stream. She didn't save the live. For those watching, it felt strange, but nothing alarming. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it was just an off day. By 10 p.m., her last post went up. A black screen with plain white text, "Don't trust the mirror." No explanation, no filters, no hashtags, no branding. It stayed up for the full 24 hours and became one of the most screenshot stories in her account's history. Theories ran wild. Some thought it was a teaser for a makeup collaboration, maybe a horror-themed palette or an April Fool's campaign. Others thought it was a joke, but a few noticed something deeper, something that felt off. Meanwhile, the hotel staff continued their routine. No one knocked on room 609. The "Do Not Disturb" sign stayed on the handle. Housekeeping skipped her floor. Her name didn't show up on any food delivery logs, no valet. Orders, no guest calls. It was as if she'd vanished into the room. Around 2 a.m., more than 24 hours after check-in, the night manager glanced up at the lobby camera feed and saw someone barefoot stepping out of the elevator. It was Lila. She was wearing a sweatshirt that looked inside out and holding what appeared to be a makeup compact in one hand. The night manager described her as calm but distant. She didn't say anything. She stood in the lobby for less than a minute before returning to the elevator and disappearing upstairs. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. At 8:45 a.m. the next morning, a guest on the floor below called the front desk to report strange noises, faint scraping sounds like furniture being dragged across a wooden floor. They didn't think much of it. It was a hotel, after all. But the Halberd didn't have wooden floors. All the guest rooms were carpeted. By Sunday morning, Lila's brother, who also served as her business manager, started to worry. She hadn't returned any texts, missed a scheduled Zoom call, no activity on her main account, no new content on her backup channel. He tried to call the hotel. No one picked up. He called again an hour later, this time getting through. When they checked room 609, they found her belongings neatly arranged. Both ring lights stood beside the vanity. Her makeup bags were unzipped but untouched. Her laptop was still plugged into the wall. Her phone sat face down on the bed, battery dead. Her half-drunk coffee had gone cold. The room itself looked undisturbed. The bed hadn't been slept in. No forced entry. No sign of struggle. Just absence. The only thing missing was the SD card from her vlogging camera. The camera body was there, placed back in its case, but the card slot was empty. Her black envelope still sat on the nightstand, unopened. Police were called, and a missing persons report was filed. By 4 p.m. investigators reviewed security footage. Lila was seen checking in alone, entering her room, and then the final 2:18 a.m. lobby appearance. There was no footage of her leaving the hotel, no service doors triggered, no guests reported any interaction. Hotel staff were questioned, nothing stood out. But then came the question that would redefine everything. What did she mean by "don't trust the mirror"? No one had an answer yet, but inside room 609, mounted above the desk, was a large vintage mirror, part of the hotel's original design. And behind it, something waited to be found, something that wouldn't reveal itself until exactly 48 hours later. At first, the silence didn't seem like a red flag, just unusual. Lila Hart had built her entire brand on consistency. Whether she was in a hotel room or her own apartment, there was always content. Quick GRWM posts, filter-heavy selfies, skincare breakdowns. She never went longer than a few hours without giving her fans a glimpse into her day. So when 12 hours passed without an update, people started noticing. And by 24, that notice turned into speculation. Her last Instagram story, just a black screen with the words, "Don't trust the mirror," had already started to circulate beyond her fan base. Some assumed it was a teaser, maybe for a new product drop or a Halloween-themed collab, but others weren't so sure. There were no tags, no branding, no emoji, no new posts followed, just silence. By the following morning, Lila's account showed no activity. Her last post, an edited video promoting a cruelty-free mascara, was now over 48 hours old. Her TikTok feed hadn't updated. Her YouTube community tab, where she normally gave behind-the-scenes updates, had been untouched since Friday. Her Discord, which she used to stay in touch with her most loyal followers, had no recent messages. And more importantly, her location had vanished. Some fans tracked her movements through tagged stories, accidental background clues, or metadata from her older uploads. That entire network suddenly went dark. Her fitness tracker, a wearable device she'd recently started showcasing in brand deals, showed no recorded steps since Saturday morning. At exactly 11:57 a.m., her phone stopped pinging GPS. That was the last digital footprint she left behind. Lila's brother, Mason, noticed first. He managed her bookings and content calendar, and she had missed a scheduled Zoom call with a beauty sponsor on Sunday morning. Then she didn't reply to his texts. Then she missed their usual weekend check-in. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was filming. Maybe she needed a break. But Lila didn't vanish. Not without telling someone. By the 36-hour mark, Mason and her agent filed a missing persons report with Chicago police. The response was swift, partly because of her public profile, partly because of the volume of online concern already escalating. Dozens of fans had begun emailing the hotel. Reddit threads ballooned with timelines, camera comparisons, theories. Something was off. Officers arrived at the Halberd Hotel on Sunday evening. They requested a welfare check. The manager initially hesitated. Privacy was everything at a boutique hotel. But with mounting pressure and an official report filed, they agreed. Hotel staff unlocked room 609 just after 6 p.m. The room looked almost untouched, no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood. But Lila wasn't there. Her phone was on the bed, face down, battery dead. Her laptop sat open on the desk, still plugged in. Her ring lights were standing beside the vanity, both powered off. Her camera bag was on the chair, camera inside, but the SD card was gone. A half-full coffee cup rested on the window ledge. It was cold. The lid was peeled back slightly. Her suitcase was zipped shut and positioned near the closet. The makeup kits she always traveled with were neatly arranged by category. Foundation, eyes, lips, just like she always showed in her tutorials. Nothing seemed thrown, nothing seemed missing. The bed was perfectly made. The pillows still propped, the sheets barely creased. It didn't look slept in. If she'd been there, she hadn't stayed long. Police did a preliminary sweep and called in forensics. No forced entry. The door was locked from the inside. The windows didn't open. It was a sealed room. Security footage was pulled within the hour. She had entered the hotel alone on Friday afternoon. She was seen on the elevator to the 6th floor. Later, at 2:18 a.m., Saturday, she appeared barefoot in the lobby, holding what looked like a makeup compact. She didn't say a word. She stared straight ahead, walked to the elevator, and went back up. That was the last time anyone saw her. No one else entered or exited room 609 after that. No service, no cleaners, no visitors. The hallway camera outside her door captured nothing out of the ordinary. Just hours of silence. Still frames. Police recovered what they could. Her laptop was password protected, her phone encrypted. Her cloud accounts were inaccessible without legal authorization. There were no messages to suggest distress, no notes, no open tabs that hinted at fear or travel plans. The envelope she'd checked in with, still sitting on the nightstand, was sealed, handwritten, addressed to no one. By Monday morning, her case had made national news. Missing influencer, boutique hotel, cryptic last message. Her fan base surged in size, but so did the speculation. Some believed she'd staged the whole thing. Others feared the worst. But even those closest to her admitted, this wasn't like Lila. She might have gone silent on social media, but never in real life, never without warning. Online communities began analyzing every detail. The live stream where she paused mid-sentence, the mirror behind her desk, the line in her story. Was it code? Was she in danger? Was it a prank that went too far? Inside the room, everything remained exactly as it was found. Still, diamond soys. Waiting, and by the time police returned to process room 609 for a second sweep, something new had appeared. A faint message. Right there, on the mirror. Something no one had seen before. Something they couldn't explain. Not yet. The detectives didn't expect much when they stepped into room 609. It had already been searched once, standard walkthrough, nothing urgent. But with a full missing persons case now active and social media feeding off every unconfirmed theory, they needed something more concrete. What they found was unsettling, not because of what was there, but because of what wasn't. There were no signs of forced entry. The door lock had registered only one access card, Lila's. No evidence anyone had broken in or out, no broken latch, no tampered window. The carpet was clean, vacuum lines still visible near the dresser. The sheets were perfectly made, pillows undisturbed, no blood, no fibers, no bodily fluids, nothing to suggest violence, nothing to suggest anything had happened at all. Except, of course, for the fact that she was gone. The room still held her presence in pieces. Her luggage remained zipped shut in the corner. Her makeup products were spread out on the vanity. Foundation, palettes, liners, all neatly arranged. A pair of false lashes, unused, sat beside her eyelash curler. Her laptop was plugged in at the desk, lid closed. Her phone, recovered earlier, had since been powered down and taken in for analysis. Nearby, a travel-sized bottle of micellar water stood half-used beside a small stack of cotton pads. It looked like someone had just stepped out for coffee, not someone who hadn't been seen in over 48 hours. The forensic techs moved through the space methodically. Swabs, prints, luminol. They weren't hopeful. Stranger abductions in locked hotel rooms were rare, especially ones this clean. But then they started looking at the mirror. It was large, nearly 4 feet wide, mounted on the wall across from the bed, framed in tarnished gold. An original piece from the hotel's first renovation, long before Lila's time. At a glance, it looked clean. But under the right light, under a dusting spray, the surface told a different story. Smudges, streaks, a single handprint at the lower edge, too low to be from someone standing, faint trails across the glass as if someone had been wiping something off. But the odd part wasn't that the mirror was dirty. It was that it had already been cleaned just the morning she arrived. Hotel staff confirmed it. The room had been freshly serviced. That mirror should have been spotless. One technician ran a light pass of magnetic powder. No fingerprints lifted cleanly, but the streaks stood out more clearly now, concentrated around one particular area, like someone had pressed their forehead against it, like someone had been too close. The detectives took photos and marked it for further testing. It didn't prove much, not on its own, but it was the first thing that felt off. They turned next to her devices. Her phone had yielded little, locked and encrypted with no backups enabled, but her laptop, though password protected, had been active long enough to give forensic analysts a glimpse of her last known digital activity. And that's where the timeline broke apart. The last files accessed on her system weren't cosmetic PDFs or brand decks. They were raw video clips, unedited vlogs from her stay at the hotel. One file stood out, time-stamped Saturday afternoon, roughly 10 hours before she vanished. It had been uploaded to a private cloud folder. The file size matched a partially uploaded video that was still syncing when authorities imaged her drive. What they could access showed her mid-setup, testing angles, complaining about the lighting in the room. She moved the ring lights closer, adjusted her camera, then suddenly walked off frame. The video kept recording for another 40 seconds. She didn't return. The feed cut off abruptly. There was no sign of the SD card. The camera body was in its case, zipped shut, but the memory slot was empty. Whoever took it, if anyone did, had left everything else behind. Her personal notes folder was blank. No journal entries, no documents, just a handful of brand contracts, a few partially edited thumbnails, and a file labeled Mirror 2. It wouldn't open. The file was damaged or possibly encrypted. Analysts weren't sure yet, but the name alone made them pause. Outside the room, the hallway had remained quiet. No security alerts, no motion triggers. The camera above her door showed nothing after 2:18 a.m. No maintenance calls were logged for her floor. No guests reported disturbances. Yet inside the room, something had clearly happened. Not violent, not loud, but something subtle, quiet, deliberate. Her coffee cup, recovered from the window ledge, tested negative for any foreign substances. Her toothbrush was dry. Her clothes were all accounted for, except for a single white robe provided by the hotel. That was missing from the closet. They pulled the cleaning logs again. Room 609 hadn't been entered by staff since Friday morning. The mirror had been cleaned then. No one else had been inside. So how did the smudges get there? Investigators began expanding the timeline. They interviewed nearby guests. Most hadn't noticed anything. One person, 2 doors down, mentioned hearing muffled pacing, feet crossing the floor again and again, back and forth, somewhere around 3 a.m. They'd assumed it was someone nervous about a flight. They hadn't reported it. No one had. Back at headquarters, the missing persons report was updated to reflect what they now knew. No signs of departure, no external access. One person entered that room, and no one had come out. And still, no trace of Lila Hart. But that mirror, smudged, streaked, and marked, was about to give up more than just fingerprints, because within the next 24 hours, something would appear there, something no one could explain. And it would be in her handwriting. Surveillance footage doesn't lie. At least, that's the assumption investigators begin with: cold images, timestamps, data without emotion. But in the case of Lila Hart, the footage didn't answer questions. It raised more of them. Detectives reviewed the first set of hotel security files late Sunday night, hours after room 609 was officially declared part of a missing persons investigation. And from the start, something felt off. The footage began normally. Friday afternoon, just after 1 p.m., Lila is seen entering the Halbert Hotel through the main entrance. She's pulling a suitcase with one hand, carrying a folded light stand in the other. Her hair's tied back, oversized hoodie pulled over her head. The front desk interaction is short, barely a minute. She smiles, signs the check-in form, takes 2 key cards. Then she heads to the elevator. She doesn't glance at anyone else in the lobby. The camera in the elevator captures her riding alone, pressing the button for the 6th floor. She shifts her weight, checks her phone once, then stares at her reflection in the elevator door. Not unusual, considering who she was. An influencer trained to check the lighting, always aware of angles. But something about the way she stares feels different, longer, less posed. Then the doors open. She walks out, turns left, and disappears from frame. That's the last time she's seen clearly. Until 2:18 a.m. the following morning. The lobby camera picks her up again, barefoot this time, wearing a long sleep shirt and slippers. In her right hand, she's clutching what looks like a makeup compact. Her eyes are fixed forward. Her posture is relaxed but slow, deliberate. The night manager on duty, an older man named Darren, would later tell detectives she appeared calm but unfocused, like someone walking through a dream. She didn't approach the desk. She didn't speak to anyone. She stood near the lobby entrance for about 30 seconds, staring out the front windows. Then she turned, glanced once at the front desk, and walked back to the elevator. Darren recalled hearing her say something under her breath as she passed, soft, almost unintelligible. The only word he caught was light. He assumed she was just looking for better lighting to film in, maybe frustrated by the room setup. He never saw her again. Upstairs, things got stranger. The camera in the hallway outside room 609 had been working without issue all week, motion activated, high definition. But when investigators pulled the overnight footage from that floor, they found a 32-second window between 2:31 and 2:32 a.m. where the feed corrupted. Just a frozen frame. One still image stretched for over half a minute. Technicians confirmed it wasn't a power outage. The camera hadn't gone offline. It hadn't been physically tampered with, but during that exact window, no data was recorded. The image on screen showed an empty hallway. Lights on, doors closed, nothing moving. It was the only known glitch in the entire building that night. Every other floor's hallway footage was intact. Immediately after the glitch, the camera resumes normal function. Still no sign of Lila entering or exiting her room. In fact, no one is seen entering or exiting room 609 at all after she returns from the lobby. Investigators checked every access point, emergency stairwells, maintenance shafts, adjacent rooms. Nothing. Keycard logs confirmed that her card had been used once, just after 2:19 a.m., to re-enter the room 609. After that, the door was never opened again, not even by housekeeping. No one entered. No one left. The makeup compact she was holding, never found. They brought in Darren for further questioning. He was calm but visibly shaken. He told them that when she passed the desk, he'd noticed something else. Her face had looked off, like she hadn't slept, but not tired in the usual way. He described her expression as blank, vacant. Like she was there, but not really there. He hadn't called security. He hadn't followed her upstairs. There had been no reason to. People came and went at all hours in the hotel. She hadn't been disruptive, just quiet, focused, or lost. When shown the glitch footage, he couldn't explain it. The tech team said the system was due for an update, but even that didn't account for a frozen frame like this, just one spot on one floor for 32 seconds. Investigators tried enhancing the frozen image, looking for reflections, shadows, movement. Nothing conclusive emerged. But some officers said they felt something when watching it. A kind of stillness that didn't make sense, not technically, just instinctually. Lila's brother was shown the same clip. He froze when he saw her barefoot in the lobby holding that compact. He said she never walked around hotels without shoes. She hated dirty floors. He also didn't recognize the compact. It wasn't one of her usual brands, not part of any recent campaign, not something she'd packed as far as he knew. None of it added up. The glitch, the silence, the missing footage. More disturbing was the final timeline. Lila walks into the lobby barefoot, says nothing to anyone, mutters something about light, returns to the 6th floor, uses her key to enter room 609, and is never seen again. No exit, no trace, just 32 seconds of corrupted video, and then nothing. It should have ended there, but it didn't. Because the next day, something appeared on that mirror in room 609, something that hadn't been there before, something no one could explain. 48 hours after Lila Hart was last seen, room 609 was scheduled for a secondary inspection. Not because of any new lead, but because everything else had gone cold. There were no updates from digital forensics, no new footage, and no sign of Lila inside or outside the hotel. The case had entered a holding pattern, no progress, no break. The room, however, still needed to be processed one last time before being officially sealed. and that's when the housekeeper found it. It was early evening when maintenance keyed into the room. This time, the request wasn't coming from police. It was standard protocol. The staff was instructed not to touch anything, just to check the thermostat and make a final visual sweep before shutting it down. The housekeeper, her name was Carla, she'd been at the Halberd for over 10 years, was the one assigned. She walked in with a checklist, glanced around the room, paused by the bathroom, and then saw it. On the mirror above the vanity, written faintly in a foggy, smeared residue, were 5 words. "Don't believe the reflection." The letters were uneven, slanted downward, like they'd been written quickly. Some were streaked, partially erased, but the message was there, visible, obvious, and chilling. Carla stepped back. She knew forensics had already gone over this room, twice. The mirror had been cleaned by hotel staff the morning Lila arrived. It had also been examined during the first sweep after her disappearance. There had been no writing, nothing visible under light dusting spray or chemical swabs. This was new, or maybe not new, maybe delayed. She called the front desk immediately. Security locked down the floor. Within an hour, investigators were back inside the room, this time with cameras and high-intensity UV lights. The words didn't glow, they didn't fluoresce, but they were real, etched faintly in what forensics later identified as oil-based residue, most likely from the skin. A fingertip. Maybe more than one. It wasn't written with lipstick or eyeliner. No cosmetic product could be matched to the substance, and the oil didn't match any of the known hotel cleaning solutions either. It was skin. Natural. Human. The words had been partially smudged, likely by a palm, brushed accidentally or deliberately, leaving partial friction marks in the lower half of the mirror. Investigators couldn't say when it had been written, but the timing raised questions. Who had entered the room after the forensic team? How could a message so prominent appear in a mirror that had already been examined? And then came the handwriting analysis. Comparing the mirror message to Lila's notebooks, autographs, and on-camera writing samples, the forensic linguist confirmed a likely match. Same angular slant, same slightly curled lowercase r, same uneven spacing between words. The message on the mirror was highly consistent with Lila Hart's handwriting. But that only made things worse. If she wrote it, when? Before she vanished? During the blackout window? After the investigation started? And how did no one see it before? The hotel mirror, like many others, was cleaned regularly. Investigators had originally dismissed it as a non-essential item, but now it had become central. They brought in light pattern analysts, checking if the message had somehow been concealed beneath the surface, if it had been written in oil, allowed to sit, and only revealed under the right lighting or humidity. No clear answers came. It remained a mystery. Online, the discovery broke wide open. The moment police confirmed the message was real, screenshots flooded Reddit, TikTok, and Twitter. Room 609 trended for 3 days. Followers debated every angle, every theory. Was it a cry for help, a metaphor, a warning? Was Lila referring to the mirror in her hotel room or something else entirely? Some pointed to her final Instagram story, posted hours before she vanished, which read only, "Don't trust the mirror." Now, here was another mirror with another message. But this time, the tone was different. Not distrust, denial. Don't believe the reflection. Within hours, content creators began digging into Lila's older posts. Some found a short vlog from 3 months earlier where she joked about how sometimes the mirror lies. Another clip showed her adjusting her lighting setup, muttering, "Ugh, that reflection's off again." No one had thought anything of it at the time, but now every offhand comment was being treated like a clue. Police remained cautious. They had no indication the message had been written under duress. There was no blood, no threat, no timeline. But the emotional weight was undeniable. It was a message left behind by someone who hadn't been seen in 2 full days, someone whose room remained untouched, whose devices remained silent, someone who had, at some point, stood inches from that mirror and written a warning to anyone who might come after her. Theories spiraled. Some believed the message had been deliberately obscured, written in oils that only revealed themselves over time. Others thought it was paranoia, the result of stress or isolation. A few claimed it pointed to something deeper, that Lila had seen something or someone that no one else could. Inside the hotel, the mirror was carefully removed and taken in as evidence. It was sealed in a temperature-controlled crate and sent to the lab. But even after extensive testing, there was no definitive answer for how or when those words had appeared. All they had was the message, and the fact that Lila had likely written it. The mirror hadn't been broken. It hadn't been touched by anyone since the initial sweep. It had simply waited, silent, until the right moment came, until someone saw. But one thing had changed now. Lila Hart hadn't just vanished. She'd spoken, and what she left behind only deepened the mystery. The search for Lila Hart's digital footprint had, until now, gone nowhere. Her phone was locked, her laptop encrypted. Her social accounts offered no clue beyond that final story. Don't trust the mirror. But buried deeper, beyond public access, was the one thing investigators hoped might shift the trajectory of the case: her private cloud drive. It wasn't easy to reach. Legal hurdles, platform delays, chain of custody procedures. But by the end of the week, detectives had a mirror image of Lila's full cloud archive. It was methodically organized, folders labeled by month, subfolders by brand name, deadlines, campaign hashtags. Influencer life systematized, until they found the one she hadn't named publicly. The folder was called Mirror Log, buried under a string of innocuous tutorial files and labeled without capitals. It didn't appear in any of her published links or shared drives. It wasn't on the desktop of her laptop or even referenced in her planner. It had no thumbnails, just raw clips, video files, unedited, time-stamped over the course of 2 days, all recorded from inside room 609. The first video was recorded just after midnight on Friday. The camera is placed on a desk, facing the mirror. Lila sits off-center, ring light partially illuminating one side of her face. She starts by saying she doesn't plan to post these, but she wants a personal record in case something happens. Her voice is calm, but noticeably quieter than usual. Flat, almost like she's talking to herself, she explains that things in the room have felt off. Not scary exactly, just strange. She describes lights flickering, though the bulbs tested fine. Her ring light, in particular, seems to dim and brighten at random. She jokes that it's either a faulty socket or some old ghost with bad taste in lighting. Then she points the camera at the mirror. She says she's noticed delays, lags, moments where her reflection doesn't move in sync with her. She waves, her reflection waves back. Then she pauses, turns her head, and waits. Nothing. Until her reflection twitches, half a second too late. Lila laughs, but not the way someone laughs when they're amused. It's tight, controlled, nervous. In the next clip, recorded about 2 hours later, she's lying on the bed. The mirror is still visible in the background. The lighting is dimmer. She whispers into the camera now, says she heard a noise, scraping, like furniture moving. But when she got up to check, everything was still. She'd placed a makeup brush upright on the counter earlier. Now it's gone. She assumes she misplaced it, but she doesn't look convinced. She keeps glancing over her shoulder toward the mirror. The third video is different, shorter, shakier. She's holding the camera in her hand and walking toward the mirror. Her voice is low but clearer. She's trying to show what she calls a glitch, says her reflection's eyes don't seem to follow her movements. She leans left. Her reflection does too. Then she abruptly turns right. Her reflection lags. Then, just for a frame, its head doesn't move at all. She gasps, and the clip ends abruptly. Forensic video analysts went through the footage frame by frame. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Minor resolution differences, frame drops, lens flares, common in low-light handheld footage. But one clip, recorded early Saturday morning, showed something harder to explain. In this video, Lila has set the camera down again. She stands directly in front of the mirror, staring at her own reflection. She says nothing for almost 30 seconds. Then she says quietly, "I don't think it's showing me anymore." She raises her hand. Her reflection follows. Then, she turns her head slightly to the left, just a few inches, and her reflection stays still, eyes forward, unmoving. Then, Lila steps out of frame, and for just under a second, the reflection remains, perfectly still, still visible. Even though she's no longer there, the camera keeps recording for another 10 seconds. Then, the feed cuts mid-sentence as Lila whispers, "Okay, That was the last clip in the mirror log folder. No exit message, no goodbye, no further explanation. Digital forensics confirmed the metadata hadn't been altered. These clips were real, unedited, uploaded directly from her laptop sometime before her final appearance in the hotel lobby at 2:18 a.m. The missing SD card from her camera was still unaccounted for, but the files that remained painted a picture no one could fully interpret. Experts tried to recreate the lag using various lenses, frame rates, lighting scenarios. They couldn't replicate it. Even when slowing the footage to a granular frame-by-frame timeline, they couldn't find a clean explanation for the moment her reflection remained after she'd stepped away. There was no sign of masking, no post-processing. Her brother was shown the footage. He watched it once, then asked for the room. He said she had always been afraid of mirrors as a kid. Something about them made her anxious. As an adult, she'd gotten used to them, part of the job, but she never kept one in her own bedroom. The discovery of mirror log added a new layer to the investigation, but it didn't offer closure. Instead, it deepened the mystery. What had Lila been trying to capture? Was she afraid? Was she documenting a breakdown or something she genuinely believed was happening? And if she believed the mirror wasn't showing her anymore, what did she think it was showing instead? The footage was archived, backed up, stored in evidence. It never went public. But the message at the heart of it, that something inside room 609 didn't behave the way it should, would haunt the case forever. Because Lila had left behind more than a warning. She'd left behind proof. And even now, no one could say for certain what exactly she'd seen staring back at her. 4 days after Lila Hart disappeared, a breakthrough came. Not from inside the hotel, but from a device pinged across the street. A specialist in digital forensics, combing through Lila's cloud access logs, noticed a remote login attempt from an unfamiliar IP address. It hadn't come from her laptop or her phone or even a known backup device, but it had accessed one of her private folders, MIRRORLOG. The timestamp was 3 days after she vanished. The location? A business-class hotel just 2 blocks away. That alone was enough to trigger immediate interest. But what sealed it was what came next. One of the missing SD cards, the same model Lila had used for her vlogging camera, had been mounted to a machine registered under a dummy serial number. The login was brief, just under 12 minutes, but it was enough to extract several files. The connection terminated shortly after that, and the device never appeared online again. Investigators acted quickly. Within hours, a warrant was obtained, and officers moved in on room 424 of the Beacon Inn. Inside was a man registered under the name Joel Carson. The ID was fake. The credit card tied to a prepaid account opened the week before. No digital footprint, no personal records. But his fingerprints were already in the system. He was Vincent Malik, age 42. A former freelance photographer with a history of stalking and harassment, including a high-profile case from 2018 where he had trailed a well-known lifestyle influencer for nearly 6 months before being arrested and charged. Charges were dropped due to lack of physical evidence. He served no jail time. Now, 5 years later, he was back in a hotel room, 2 blocks from where Lila had last been seen, logged in under a fake name, and in possession of material that should have never left her devices. Detectives found photos printed in high resolution, some framed, others laid out carefully on the desk beside his laptop. All of them were of Lila, some from her Instagram, others pulled from her stories, others from deeper sources, unposted thumbnails, unfinished reels, content that had never been made public. There were even screenshots from the mirror log folder, images showing Lila staring into the mirror in room 609, lit only by her ring light. Vincent didn't run. He didn't resist. He asked calmly if they had seen what she recorded. When asked if he knew where Lila was, he said only, "I didn't touch her. I just watched." And then, "She left through the other side." His answers didn't make sense, or maybe they did, and no one wanted to believe them. During the interview, Vincent admitted to following Lila's career for nearly a year. He claimed he was drawn to her, not because of her looks, he said, but because she was tuned in. He wouldn't explain what that meant. But then he mentioned room 609, without prompting. He described it in detail, the position of the mirror, the soft yellow tone of the hallway lights, the flicker in the bulb outside the elevator that Lila had never posted publicly. When asked how he knew that, he shrugged. "I've stayed there," he said. "You don't forget that mirror." He denied any physical contact. He denied entering her room, denied following her that night. He insisted the SD card had come to him. "Delivered," he said. "No return address. Just a manila envelope outside his door. Inside were photos, a memory card, and a printed screenshot from her cloud folder. No fingerprints, no postage." Detectives didn't believe him, but they couldn't place him at the Halberd Hotel the night Lila vanished. His face didn't appear in the surveillance footage. His name wasn't on the guest list. His phone had been off for 48 hours during the window of her disappearance. Still, what they found in his room was enough to hold him. A forensic sweep uncovered fragments of video files that appeared to be partial rips from Lila's raw footage, clips never uploaded, never posted. Among them was a still image extracted from a corrupt video file showing Lila standing in front of her mirror. Only in the frame, her reflection was missing. The glass was empty. Just her. Standing. Staring at something behind the camera, behind whoever, or whatever, was recording. Vincent refused to explain how he got the image. When pressed again on Lila's whereabouts, he answered only with one line. "She's still in the room. You're just looking in the wrong direction." It made no sense. It also mirrored a comment Lila had made in one of her last private clips where she whispered, "I don't think it's showing me anymore." Investigators were split. Some believed Vincent had found a way into her room and spied on her through a peephole, or maybe even hacked into her devices. Others believed he had orchestrated the whole thing, lured her, followed her, and stolen the footage to cover his tracks. But there was no DNA linking him to the hotel, no physical evidence placing him inside room 609. The man in the frame, the one who had her photos, her SD card, and access to her private recordings, was never charged with abduction. Only digital theft, only unlawful possession of private data. Vincent Malik was released on bail, and to this day, he has never revealed what was on the full SD card. He claims he destroyed it, but when asked why, his answer remained the same. "She asked me to." The mystery of Lila Hart deepened, because if Vincent didn't follow her and didn't hurt her and never entered the room, then how did he get her footage? And what exactly was he watching through the mirror? After Vincent Malik's arrest, detectives turned their attention not forward but back to the place where it all began. Room 609, the one constant in a case filled with contradictions. If there was no trace of Lila leaving and no suspect firmly tied to her disappearance, then maybe the room itself was the anomaly. That's when the history of the Halberd Hotel came under scrutiny, and what surfaced hadn't been disclosed to anyone, not police, not staff, and certainly not guests. The Halberd had always marketed itself as vintage with character, crown molding, velvet chairs, restored lighting from the 1960s. But behind the charm was a structure far older. Blueprints showed that the building wasn't originally a hotel. For nearly 3 decades before its renovation in 1999, it had served as a private investigation firm. A large one. The 6th floor, where Lila had stayed, was originally the surveillance wing. Small offices, interview rooms, and observation chambers. Room 609 had once been used for monitoring. According to construction records, it had included a one-way glass panel, designed for surveillance training. When the firm closed and the building changed hands, Most of the mirrors were replaced, but not all. One remained. The large gold-framed mirror above the vanity in 609 had never been removed. It had simply been cleaned up, repainted, and left hanging. That detail had never been disclosed, not to housekeeping, not to management, and certainly not to the guests. Investigators requested access to old guest complaints, searching for any pattern tied specifically to that room. At first, the records were thin, but buried in handwritten logs, scanned files, and staff email notes, a pattern began to emerge. Several guests, mostly women, had asked to switch rooms shortly after checking into 609. Their reasons varied: headaches, sleep paralysis, the sense of being watched. One described seeing movement in the mirror that didn't match her own. Another claimed to hear breathing at night, even when alone. And then there was the 2003 report. It had been filed by a guest who checked out early after finding the words, "She's behind you," written across the mirror in lipstick. The report was logged but never followed up. She was refunded for her last night and given a discount voucher. No photographs were taken, no maintenance call made. Just a note buried in paperwork no one had reviewed since. That changed everything. Detectives ordered the mirror removed. Behind it, they found a narrow space, about 18 inches deep, sealed off with thin drywall, but not entirely enclosed. It had once been an access cavity, likely used for wiring and camera installation during the building's PI days. A tangle of disconnected cables was still inside. The drywall had aged, but someone had disturbed it. Along the floor were faint scuff marks, footprints possibly, and in the corner, half buried in dust, lay a single makeup brush. It wasn't part of the hotel's inventory, and it didn't match any of Lila's known kits. Hotel management insisted the space had never been opened. It wasn't on any schematic shared with housekeeping or staff. No one knew it was there, yet it had clearly been accessed, recently enough that the floor still showed signs of use. Forensics couldn't lift any viable prints. The dust and moisture levels had degraded most surface evidence. But the implication was enough to reopen the scene entirely. Room 609 wasn't just a locked room mystery. It was a structural blind spot, a place designed to look one way while functioning another. Publicly, the hotel said nothing. The room was quietly closed off for extended maintenance. But inside the department, detectives knew this discovery reframed the entire case. If someone had been behind that mirror, either in the hours before Lila vanished or during her stay, it changed every assumption about what was possible. It explained the smudges, the distorted reflections, the sense of being watched. It even aligned with Lila's own recordings, where she spoke of delays in her reflection, of something not behaving right. All of it traced back to that single piece of glass. And yet, none of it proved where she went. The mirror was taken in as evidence, the access cavity photographed and sealed, but there were no cameras pointing at the wall, no footage of anyone entering or exiting through it, just an open space and silence. To this day, no one has been able to confirm how long that cavity had been used, or if it had ever been fully sealed. What's clear is that the history of room 609 had been overlooked, first by the hotel, then by investigators, and finally by time. It had been standing there all along, part mirror, part memory, all unresolved, and for those who'd stayed there before, who'd felt the same cold stillness Lila had tried to describe, it became clear that maybe she hadn't imagined it. Maybe she'd just been the only one who left a message behind. For weeks, investigators had dismissed the corrupted camera footage from the 6th-floor hallway of the Halberd Hotel as a technical malfunction, just a frozen frame, a 32-second data gap on an otherwise clean surveillance feed. It wasn't unusual. Systems glitched, servers failed, cameras froze. But one digital forensics expert, brought in on a separate case, asked for access to the original data dump, and what he found shifted the focus of the entire investigation. It came down to 3 seconds. Using enhanced frame reconstruction and forensic stabilization, he was able to isolate a portion of the corrupted segment and extract what had previously been unreadable. Not full motion, just a partially recovered loop of distorted frames. But it was enough to see her. Lila. Standing in the hallway, just outside room 609, motionless. She wasn't walking. She wasn't reaching for her keycard. She was staring across the hall toward the large mirror mounted between the two elevator doors. Her posture was rigid, shoulders slightly hunched, arms at her sides. The mirror had been placed there for aesthetics, to make the hallway feel larger. But it reflected everything: doors, guests, movement, and in this case, it reflected Lila. Only something about the reflection didn't feel right. The footage showed her face turned slightly to the left, as if she was listening for something. But in the mirror, her head was straight, facing forward. Her body in the reflection wasn't angled the same way. At first, the technician assumed it was just compression distortion, a glitch in the frame alignment. But then, something else appeared. Behind her, a faint silhouette began to emerge, almost like a second figure standing too close, just over her shoulder. The outline was hazy, not fully formed, but it was there. Too close to be another guest, too large to be a shadow. It didn't match any known reflection in the scene. It didn't mirror anything else in the hallway. And more unsettling, it moved, not with her, independently. The silhouette shifted forward, not walking exactly, just drifting, almost gliding, its shape distorted by frame artifacts and light refraction. Then, just as it appeared, it vanished. No fade, no exit. One frame, it was there. The next, gone. The image flickered twice, and the video returned to static. The 3 seconds were enough to reignite every theory. The footage was shown to Chicago PD. At first, they suspected tampering. Maybe someone had edited the footage before the hotel turned it over. But the raw metadata confirmed it hadn't been altered. The glitch came from the camera itself, not post-processing. Still, the department issued no official statement. Internally, they debated whether to include the frames in the case file at all. Some called it an anomaly. Others quietly admitted it felt deliberate. Lila's brother, Mason, was given access to the clip in private. He watched it twice, didn't speak, then pulled out his phone and opened a voice note Lila had left him 3 days before she flew to Chicago. In it, she said she'd been having dreams about reflections not matching her movements, about something watching her from behind the glass. She described a moment where she turned away from a mirror, but felt like something didn't turn with her. Then she said something that Mason hadn't fully understood until now. "I keep thinking if I look at it too long, I won't be the one looking back." He hadn't told the police that part before. He thought it was just stress, burnout, a weird metaphor about social media. But now, seeing her frozen in that hallway, staring into the mirror while a figure drifted behind her, he wasn't sure. Investigators brought in additional analysts to examine the footage, image specialists, compression experts. Every frame was pulled apart, pixel by pixel. The consensus? There were anomalies consistent with compression errors, but the motion of the silhouette didn't align with known artifact patterns. It wasn't a ghost, but it also wasn't nothing. It moved with intent. It had mass. It had form, just not one they could fully define. The official case file now included the footage under unresolved visual anomaly. But no charges were filed, no suspect was identified, no explanation given. Back online, the footage leaked within hours. A low-resolution version found its way to Reddit, then TikTok, where it was picked apart in real time by thousands of viewers. Theories exploded. Some believed it was a glitch. Others swore it was a figure, an entity, a double. A few fixated on Lila's reflection, not the silhouette, but the fact that her mirror image wasn't aligned with her real body. They pointed to her last known videos, to her whispered messages about the mirror not showing her anymore, and one word kept surfacing: duplicated. Her brother said she used that term more than once, said she was afraid of being copied, replaced, not in a sci-fi way, something quieter, subtler, like something was learning to mimic her. Now, with the recovered footage, those fears didn't seem so irrational. What the 3 seconds showed wasn't evidence, it wasn't admissible, it wouldn't solve the case, but it changed how everyone looked at it. Because in that moment, those final frames, Lila Hart wasn't screaming. She wasn't running. She wasn't being dragged away. She was just staring into her own reflection, and whatever she saw there was staring back. Months passed, then a year, then two. But no trace of Lila Hart was ever recovered. No body, no confirmed sightings, no activity on her bank accounts or devices. For all the technology available, security footage, cloud forensics, metadata analytics, the investigation reached a quiet, unfinished halt. Leads dried up, witnesses moved on, and room 609 remained sealed behind a maintenance notice no one at the Halberd Hotel could explain anymore without discomfort. Vincent Malik, the man found with her SD card private footage and hundreds of images saved from both public and unreleased content, was never charged in her disappearance. His fingerprints weren't found in the room. No surveillance placed him near the hotel during her stay. His possessions, while disturbing, weren't enough to hold him beyond the limited charges of stolen data and identity fraud. He walked free on bail and has remained out of the public eye since. He gave no interviews, filed no lawsuits, and refused to answer any more questions. All he ever said was, "She asked me to destroy it." Investigators couldn't prove he was lying, but they also couldn't explain how he'd gained access to her private cloud files or one of her SD cards. He didn't own any spyware. He didn't appear on any local networks. The man who had watched her most closely was a mystery himself, untethered, clean of hard evidence, yet undeniably connected to a timeline he claimed he'd never been a part of. The mirror from room 609 was removed by court order. Forensics cataloged it, boxed it, and placed it into evidence storage. But even after its removal, the room didn't feel different. According to two officers who handled the transfer, something about the glass stayed with them. Within a month, both filed internal mental health evaluations. One reported experiencing intense sleep paralysis for the first time in his life. The other claimed he saw faint movement in reflective surfaces while alone in his apartment. Not ghosts, not hallucinations, just something out of place, just enough to look again. The department didn't include those notes in the case file. Officially, the mirror was archived and marked as non-essential physical evidence, but no one requested it back. No requests for release, no legal challenges, not even from the hotel. As far as the world was concerned, that piece of glass was just a mirror. And yet, no one ever wanted to hang it again. Online, the story became legend. Forums filled with theories, timelines, conspiracy threads. TikTok creators dissected Lila's final post frame by frame. Reddit users mapped out possible meanings behind her last message. Don't believe the reflection. Was it literal, metaphorical, psychological? People claimed to have seen similar delays in their own mirrors. Others suggested room 609 had become a hotspot for surveillance abuse, hinting at illegal recording through two-way mirrors. But when city inspectors returned to the hotel, they found no live wires, no cameras, no recording devices of any kind. The cavity behind the mirror remained empty. Some believed Lila had suffered a mental break, that the stress of her career, the constant online scrutiny, and the pressure of her influencer persona had fractured something internally. That her logs were not documentation, but delusion. That she'd staged her own disappearance as a final performance. But if she did, she never returned to the stage. Others believed something far stranger. They pointed to the mirror's origin as a one-way surveillance panel from decades earlier. They speculated about what might have been left behind, not just physically, but energetically. Patterns of behavior, trauma embedded in the structure of the room. They talked about the overlapping timelines between surveillance history and Lila's own recordings and what she may have captured unintentionally. The most extreme theories focused on duplication, that the reflection she saw was never hers, that something on the other side had begun to learn her shape, her voice, her mannerisms, and in the end had replaced her. A copy without origin. A presence that stepped forward only when she turned away. Those were just theories, none provable, none admissible. But they echoed one thing her brother remembered vividly, something Lila had told him years before, long before Chicago, long before the Halberd. If you look in a mirror long enough, she'd said, you start to wonder which side you're really on. Her brother never forgot those words. After her disappearance, he deleted all but 2 of her videos from her cloud archive. He refused interviews, refused podcast invites. The footage that remained, the raw clips from room 609, were sealed and secured by court order, unreleased to the public. Only a handful of people ever saw the unedited versions, and none of them would speak on the record about what they saw in the final frames. The case was officially moved to inactive status 14 months after she vanished. Not closed, not solved, just paused. Her file sits among hundreds of others at Chicago PD. Missing adult, foul play suspected, no body recovered. But among all the files, hers remains one of the few where the subject appeared to leave a warning. Not to her family, not to the police, but to whoever came next. Written not on paper or phone or video, but on the surface she seemed to fear the most. The mirror. It's the only physical message Lila Hart left behind, and maybe the only piece of her that ever came back.